I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing Hurricane Child by Kheryn Callender, who is now Kacen Callender. I listened to the audiobook narrated by Crystal Roche. So this is a beautiful coming-of-age story about a 12-year-old girl who lives on an island in the Caribbean and just trying to figure out life and just come to grips with all the complex, nuanced problems that life throws at you as you grow up. Crystal Roche's narration on this book was amazing. She had the best accent, and it really made me feel like I was in the Caribbean listening to all this stuff happen. That just added so much to the story and made it feel so real, because it was this beautiful tropical paradise where all the tourists go to see this gorgeous place. But this girl is just a local, and her life is kind of hard, and she just has to deal with living in this tourist destination and not really being in that upper class that goes on those kinds of vacations, not having that life. This was a wonderful book. I highly recommend that you go read it and then come back to hear my opinions. So I was amazed to watch how strong Caroline was dealing with all the stuff she had to in her short life that had been very, very hard. Her parents were both so horrible. Her mother left and her father is there physically but not really emotionally for her, and her life just seems so desolate and empty. She doesn't have any support at home. She has to overcome all these crazy obstacles just to get to school for the day. Once she's there, all the kids bully her, and the teacher is horrible and bullies her worse than the kids do. And everything about her life just seems so difficult. She has a line where she says she'd be very surprised to live to adulthood, and it's not because she's afraid of anything or she has illnesses or anything. It's just because life is kind of beating her up. And even though she has to work so hard, she doesn't really give up on being herself. She still has this inner strength, and she still expresses herself and stands up for herself and says what she wants, and she just has an amazing amount of courage. There are several points throughout the book where people talk about how she's a child, and these doesn't need to worry about adult things, and she is so much more mature and handles life's problems with much more grace than a lot of the adults around her. She was so determined to find her mother, and the adults just don't tell her anything. This book could have been so much more simple if her father just let her know what was happening with her mother, or if her mother stopped by and said, "Hey, I moved back, I thought I'd come by and see you." But all the adults just put so many obstacles in her path, and she's just still so determined, and she keeps seeing this woman who is kind of guiding her, and we never know if it's real or if it's in her head, if it's magical realism, but we think Callender can see it too. And that's part of the reason that Caroline's relationship with Callender is so special, is because they're both so similar, and they both look at the world in this same magical way, even though they're in completely different social circles. Caroline is the pariah that everybody hates, and Callender is this amazingly popular girl that just everybody loves on sight, but they still become such wonderful friends. And Caroline knows right away that she wants more than friendship from Callender, and Callender has to work really hard to get there. She's embarrassed and ashamed, and eventually admits to herself and to Caroline how she feels, and it's just such a beautiful love story. People often say things like, "Oh, they're just kids, they don't really know what love is." But children can have amazingly strong feelings too, and these two have such a strong emotional connection. Their relationship is going to shape their lives forever. It's a very important part of who they are. This experience they had of falling in love is so real and so important. And I think it's really important to remember that children who are 12 years old can experience that and can feel that much emotional depth, and you shouldn't just write off their feelings. There were so many moments in this book that were so heartbreaking. The more Caroline found out the reality about her parents, how her mother had left her willingly and then come back but not found her and had gone and set up this whole new life without finding Caroline, and that her father had this whole nother family that he didn't want to tell her about, and that neither of her parents really let her into their lives. It was just so cruel and so heartbreaking. And at the end, Caroline really ends up being the bigger person, and she tries to forgive both of her parents and starts working on establishing a relationship with them. And she really shows so much more maturity than they do. And then also at the end, Callender moved away, which was devastating, but it was also hopeful because she and Caroline still wrote to each other. And whether they end up having a relationship in later life or not, they're still really good friends, and they're an important part of each other's lives, no matter what way they stay in each other's lives. And it was so wonderful at the very end to watch Caroline and Marie Antoinette actually become friends. And even though Marie Antoinette had been popular, she had been bullied too. And to see that they did have things in common. And to see that Caroline is kind of learning how to make friends and how to connect to people. And she will have people to talk to in her life and people who care about her. And that's just so wonderful and hopeful from the point where she started. Her life really has the potential to get so much better, and she's dealt with all these struggles and amazingly difficult things that life has thrown at her, and she's come out of it with so much poise and determination, and without losing a bit of herself or having to sacrifice any of who she is. And I just love that so much. This book was beautiful and heartbreaking and wonderful, and I'm just so glad I read it.